Good morning, friends. I am Patty Elhoff, the author of Upcycled with Decoupage, and today I wanted to show you how I took this silverware box that was no longer being used and I turned it into something where I could actually store some of my paintbrushes and a couple of other odds and ends, and here's how it turned out. And the box on the inside, if you'll notice, has these little spaces. By the way, I cleaned this whole thing off. I degreased it. I just used alcohol all over the whole surface to clean it off. And inside it's got these little spaces and compartments that are perfect for my brushes and a few other supplies that I have. And the way I began was I took a paintbrush and I covered the whole outside surface with chalk paint, and I did use 2 coats of chalk paint. You don't need to sand and you don't need a base coat when you're using chalk paint, which is why I use chalk paint. I use a brush on the first coat and then a roller for the second coat. And then I put this aside to dry. Now I'm doing something called a dry decoupage technique, which means I'm going to use an iron to adhere the napkins. Now the reason that I am using an iron is because I am working on a flat surface. And that is the best way to avoid wrinkles when you do the dry technique. What I'm doing here is painting a coat of decoupage glue over the whole surface. You really want to make sure you have full coverage on this surface where you're applying the napkins. And you want to make sure that you get these edges because they're very easy to miss. And what I tend to do is use a bristle brush like this, cover the whole surface. Now just the top, I'm not working on the sides. I won't be decoupaging those. And I'm just adding a whole coat of decoupage glue up on the top, and I'm going to use my fingers just to run it back and forth to smooth it out so that there are no lines that you can get from a paintbrush, but also because you want to make sure every section of this is covered. Otherwise your napkins can tear when you move on to the next step. It's very important that you let this step dry completely before you move on to this next step. Now I'm taking my napkin. This is a very busy napkin, but I'm taking the napkin and I'm going to line up the edges. I'm separating it so that there's just the top ply here. And I'm taking a piece of parchment paper and I'm laying it over the section that I'm going to work on. By work on, I mean where I'm going to iron the napkin down to the surface. Now I'm using a craft iron. Everything is available on my website and the link is right below this video in the description box of this video. If you'd like to go over there, you can just read about this if you'd like. Now I'm not using a large iron because I have a lot more control with this smaller one, and this is a very big box. It would be a lot easier to use a larger iron, but I have burnt the paper in the past. I've gotten the iron too hot and it didn't work well. So you want to be careful. Even if you're using a craft iron, I have used the craft iron directly over the surface, and some people have told me that that burns their napkins and it browns them. So I don't recommend it unless you experiment first. And you want to take your time with that part. Now I have excess napkin over the edge, so I just went around the edges and filed everything away. And you should file in one direction. I'm just going in a downward motion all around the sides to remove the excess. And just so you know, wrinkles do still happen. They're just a part of life with napkins. So as long as the rest of your piece looks okay, this really won't be that noticeable when we're all done. Just make sure it is ironed firmly down onto the surface. Now I'm taking decoupage glue, and I'm using a napkin decoupage glue, and this is a bit softer of a brush. And again, I'm really focusing on these edges. If you don't get the edges down, those are the pieces that can peel up, pull away. Even in humidity, they can start to come away. So you really want to get those secured down. And I'm covering the whole surface with decoupage glue. Now it's already dry, so you don't have to worry about waiting for it to dry, but you do want to be a little careful in this part. I'm going in fast motion here for the sake of the video, but you want to apply light pressure and take your time here also, because if you missed any spots, a tear could happen easily right here at this point. Now I'm just going to close up on this one area where even though I was very thorough, it seems like the napkin didn't quite adhere well right here. So I'm just going to carefully apply my decoupage glue over it, nice and slowly and gently, and that will be secure now. And I'm going to put this aside to dry. And once everything is dry, I'm taking a stencil. All of this is on my website. I have several different stencils on the website if you care to go over and look or purchase them. And this is low tack tape. And I'm centering the stencil. I'm using the low tack tape so that it doesn't tear anything or pull anything up. And once this is centered, I am taking Liquitex modeling paste, which is a very heavy gel medium. You can use textured paint, joint compound, or another heavy gel medium. I am using this because it dries to a very hard, thick surface, and I know I'm going to be using this box a lot. You can color these mediums. However, you have to be careful because when you use liquid, it can thin out your medium and you will lose the three-dimensional effect. So I'm using RIT dye, and I started out with just a few crystals of this RIT dye and said that's not enough, so I added some more. And now I'm going to apply this using a spatula over the stencil to give it a nice raised effect. I also added some chalk paint. Now, I'm sorry, I pulled this off carefully. I'm going to let this dry, and it dried really quickly within about a half an hour. I then took some chalk paint that was almost identical to the background of the napkin color, and I just did a few accents around the sides. Now I went back in and darkened both of these because they dried so much lighter. But before I did that, once everything dried, I did a dry brush technique where I just loaded the brush, unloaded it, meaning I took the excess paint off, and with an almost dry brush, I went back over and just muted the surface a little bit. I then took a nail file and I went all around the outsides of the box, and I tried to age this in areas where it would look natural. So I didn't want to overdo it, but I just wanted to add a little bit of what looked like some natural wear on the outside of the box. I then wiped away any of the excess dust, and I applied a top coat. This is a Liquitex matte varnish. I didn't want any shine on this, and I applied this over the whole box, the outside, the top, the sides, everything, and let it dry. And while that was drying, I took some jewelry findings, and I just clipped these ends off here, and I put some E6000 glue on the back of these and applied it to the metal drawer pull that was in the front there. E6000 glue holds forever, but you want to make sure this is in an upright position because the E6000 glue does take some time to cure, to dry completely. So you want to make sure this is standing in an upright position. Now, unfortunately, my stencil dried so light, I forgot to account for the fact that when something dries, it gets lighter. So I had to go over the stencil again with a color that was also in the napkin and just make it a little bit darker so that I could see it. You will not have to do this probably. I just wanted you to know why the end picture will look a little bit different than how it started out. And now the next day, everything is dry, and here's how our piece looks close up. You can see that what looks like a little bit of natural aging along the sides. Here's the stencil over the napkin, the two stencils. And I can also show you the inside of this. This is coming in really handy for me. I know where all of my brushes are now. There's a few different places to put them, even a spot up in the top there for scissors, and I have a few of these smaller pairs of scissors. So I hope you guys enjoyed this project. If you've got any questions, please feel free to let me know. I'm all too happy to help you out. Upcycle with Decoupage is also on Facebook. If you go over and like and follow the page, you'll be notified every week when I put a new video out. And thank you so much for subscribing. I know you guys must be like, enough with the subscribing. But it's really important to us. And I thank you for always listening to that little spiel. And I will see you guys next week with another video. Thanks again, friends. Bye-bye.